As the cliche goes, April showers bring May flowers. But usually what comes after is the heat and dryness of summer. Hello again, Essay here. And before the hot weather of the holiday shows up, you should indulge in my new short story, The White Cat, a free exclusive on Substack. The links are down below in description. Join Margot Thompson, a beautiful stage actress and recent widow who finds salvation in the form of a white cat during a night of terror. While checking out my oddball thriller, remember that my Glitch series is still available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The links are down below in the description. While you'll find my peculiar story about a white pussy entertaining, that doesn't mean I'm out of ideas. I still have more stories coming down the pike, so as long as I don't run into any mishaps, you'll see those stories as well. Now let's get back to the video. Hello again, Essay here. Have you ever heard of having a problem and then finding a solution? Well, you go back to ancient humans, Stone Age. Humans probably had to deal with predators, saber-toothed tigers, stuff like that. So they invented a solution. Sticks and stones, or taking a stick and rubbing it against a rock and making a little point, basically a spear. Yeah, anyone who saw the original 2001: A Space Odyssey probably remembers the Dawn of Man scene, where the ancient humans, which were basically nothing more than Pliocene apes, are fighting over a mud hole, and then one of the monkeys developed a club using a yak bone, and then hit the other monkey upside the head, and then took the mud hole from him. Well, humans always been like that. Indeed, humans helped develop fire because it basically kept them warm, and sometimes kept the predators away. And then when humans were faced with rain, humans developed the umbrella. But what if you have a solution to a problem that doesn't exist? Or in other words, what if you create a problem where none exists and then you try to create a solution to fix the problem? Well, some would say that's putting the cart before the horse. And I remember hearing that phrase back as a kid and didn't quite understand what it meant. And it basically meant that sometimes if something is out of order, maybe you should put it in the right order. And indeed, anyone who's familiar with the so-called environmental movement knows that these people definitely got the cart before the horse. Because indeed, back when I was a kid, I remember Earth Day and people complaining about how there was a bunch of pollution, unbreathable air and stuff like that. And indeed, back when I was a kid, I remember they showed us pictures of the Pittsburgh back in the middle 20th century, 1950s. And it showed how the steel mills around Pittsburgh were belching out so much smoke that in high noon, you couldn't see the hand in front of your face because of so much smoke. It just blotted out the sun. That's pretty bad. And wait for it, the Ohio River near Cleveland, it was so polluted, full of chemicals, that eventually the damn thing caught fire. Or I should say, the chemicals floating on top of the Ohio River caught fire. Yeah. And eventually people say, you know what, we're not treating our environment right. We got to clean things up. And they did. I remember back when I was a kid, I remember hearing stories about Love Canal and how it used to be an old chemical site, built in the early 20th century, making stuff for the military. But then it got closed down. But the place was so polluted that the company itself, which had long since went defunct, couldn't even clean up the place. So they just kind of left it there. And eventually, during the end of the 70s, they had what's called the Superfund Act, where they basically, set aside federal funds to clean up the place. And they did. They did clean it up. Took them a while, but they did it. But the thing is, those were clear examples of where there's a problem, people create a solution. But in the present day, things when it comes to environmental stuff have gone a little bit off the rails. Now, of course, some of you out there, have heard about the Green New Deal. And some of you say, oh, God, not that. Yeah, I know. But the funny thing is, even though they tried to push through Congress, was that guy, Senator Markey, I think he and Cortez, that woman from New York, the bartender who's in Congress, yeah, her. Even though it didn't go through Congress, it doesn't mean it didn't go away. Indeed, when Joe Biden became president, they pushed through a damn bill. I think it was in 2022, I think it was, where they pushed through a bill. They called it the damn Recovery Act. And of course, some of you probably remember that bill. But then it came out afterwards that it was basically the Green New Deal light. And then you say, wait, what? Yeah, it was. And then you say, well, why'd they call it the Recovery Act? Because they didn't want to tell you what it really was about. Okay, are we clear now? Well, anyway, I gotta show you a clip of a video from Clayton Morris, of Redacted. And believe me, these people are now enacting some of the stuff that was in that bill. And believe me, you're not going to believe what they're doing. Okay, are you ready? Here we go.
And the Biden administration just took one major step to ensure its total collapse. This is not fantasy. Biden's EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, just passed a new rule that will destroy our power infrastructure in the United States. We've been warning here on the show how bad it is already. Now they want to make it even worse by layering on this brand new rule from the EPA. This isn't conjecture. Author Alex Epstein, whose books include Fossil Future, the Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, has just detailed how this is going to happen in a new Substack called How EPA's Power Plant Rule Will Destroy Our Grid. So in it, he writes, EPA's rule is literally the single greatest threat to our grid in the history of electricity, since it would ban up to 1/6 of our reliable power and prevent replacements amid an electricity crisis. So what exactly is going on here? Well, here's what the EPA just issued, and it's a new carbon pollution standard update, and it will affect all of us. Greenhouse gas standards and guidelines for fossil fuel-fired power plants. And in it, it breaks it down in multiple ways. Right now, and you can see here and highlighted in red, ensuring that all long-term coal-fired plants and base-load new gas-fired plants control 90% of their carbon pollution. So right now, our grid is teetering on the edge of collapse. Premature shutdowns of reliable fossil fuel plants have left us vulnerable. Just look at what happened in Texas, of course, right? Just a few short years ago. Most of North America is at an elevated or high risk of electricity shortfalls right now between 2024 and 2028. This isn't fear-mongering. This is our reality right now. And now with millions of illegal immigrants now admitted to the population of the United States who are using our power
for free.
Right? I mean, we had J.G. Carroll on the show yesterday. He pointed out it's not 30 million. It's upwards of 43 million illegal immigrants now in the United States thanks to the Biden administration. Where are we going to get this extra power during the summer months and into the winter to handle this massive influx of illegal immigrants using power, to charge all their free cell phones, to run all those air conditioning units? We can't handle it. And as the NERC writes in their new report, Program Areas and Departments and Event Performance Analysis, this is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, published their event analysis for the summer. Newsflash, it's not good. I was going through the report this morning, and it's eye-opening. Their predictions, just take a look at some of their predictions here on where these areas, and this is North America, so not just in the U.S., you see Canada, of course, areas that are going to be inundated with power demands, surging load growth in these particular areas. Do you recognize any of these areas where they could be seeing a surge in usage? Like we just covered yesterday with the Midwest and the amount of people that are, of course, being ferreted by by buses, illegal immigrants that are coming across the border and then taken to these different locations. Unbelievable, huge load. So a grid collapse would be perfect right before an election. So the Biden administration is about to release 1 million barrels of gasoline. This happened this week. We learned this week that the Biden administration, worried about re-election, is completely emptying our oil reserves in the Northeast, he announced on Tuesday, trying to lower gas prices as summer driving season heats up. Biden has already completed his plan to completely deplete the strategic oil reserves, which are meant in case of a war, right? And he hasn't been able to fill it back up because the prices are so much higher, they haven't been able to do that. Remember, he promised us we would deplete the strategic oil reserves, give you lower gas prices, and then what we'll do is, he promised this, these are his words, we will refill it at a savings to taxpayers. Those were his words. And so he started this process before the midterm elections back in 2022 in order to help Democrats win. And he's going to do it right again right now so he can win his own election. Do you think this is politically motivated? Well, he was asked this question the last time he did it, back in 2022. Listen.
What is your response to Republicans who say you are only doing this SPR release to help Democrats in the midterms?
Where have they been the last 4 months? That's my response.
Is it politically motivated, sir?
No, it's not.
3 weeks before the midterms.
Look, it makes sense. I've been doing this for how long now? It's not politically motivated at all. It's motivated to make sure that I continue to push on what I've been pushing on. And that is making sure there's enough oil that's being pumped by the companies so that we have the ability to be able to produce enough gas that we need here at home, oil we need here at home, and at the same time, keep moving in the direction of providing for alternative energy. That's what I've been doing. Now, the problem is these guys are asleep. I don't know where they've been. And they seem, the price at the pump should reflect what the price of a barrel of oil costs. And it's not going down consistently.
Yeah.
Gosh, he seems like a different person.
That's 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? In just 2 years.
So I have a bit of a math question on that. So if the strategic oil reserve is filled at one price of the oil when it was presumably much lower, they fill those reserves. Now they release it now, sell it at a much inflated price, then buy at the inflated price to refill those reserves. How are prices ever going to go down when doing that? It sounds like a double profit deal for oil companies.
It's curious. Well, it's Washington math. So it's not math that you're used to or accustomed to, right? It's a totally different kind of math.
Right. And he speaks out of both sides of his mouth, because while saying that he wants to issue permits for more oil and gas to especially the Alaskan natives that want it there in their communities in
Anwar, yeah.
In order to bring prosperity to their communities for the oil that is there. And they have, many tribal leaders have released letters to the EPA and the Biden administration saying, please bring these projects here. Our communities need it. We will do it well, and we will do it responsibly. economically, and it will help the economy overall because rising tide floats all boats. And he has said he would do it, but when that gets caught up in litigation rather, by environmentalists, he doesn't fight them because he's spineless and speaking out of both sides of his mouth like a career politician.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right about Alaska. I mean, they absolutely want it. They voted overwhelmingly for it in the Alaska National Wildlife Reserve and other spots. They want the drilling there. They want the drilling. They want the jobs. And of course, America could use it. But of course, we've farmed all of this out, and we've totally reduced the amount of production in the United States.
We'd like to pretend that we're not getting it indirectly from Russia,
right,
or China, or anyone who we like to say on paper we hate. And so we, as my grandmother would put it, go around our elbow to get to our ass when we could have, just scratched our ass directly. Right, Grandma?
Right.
God rest her soul.
Yes, Grandma. Leave it to Grandma to give us the colorful language. Well, and, if the grid crisis wasn't enough, EV demand and AI demand are off the charts right now, going to make things far worse. So, and, you would think, right, the demand for electricity is about to skyrocket, and that's the case. So why? Well, EV mandates, the electric vehicle mandates from the Biden administration, and the rising energy demands from AI. So you're literally pulling back on these coal-powered plants at the same time when the demand is off the charts and rising. Does that make any sense at all? Look at Germany, what energy crisis they're facing right now. I mean, this is unbelievable. So what you're doing is our peak demand is projected to rise by over 79 gigawatts in the summer and 90 gigawatts in winter over the next decade. That's like adding an entire power generating capacity of California on top. We're talking about a massive artificial demand that our already struggling grid can't handle. So EVs and AI and all of the massive computing power associated with artificial intelligence right now. So the EPA's rule will shut down coal and prevent natural gas replacements. Now, here's the kicker. The EPA's new rule is set to shut down nearly all of our remaining coal plants and prevent new natural gas plants from being built. Absolute freaking madness in the United States right now. By mandating impossible standards, the EPA is effectively destroying a significant chunk of our reliable power. Again, just like Germany. They say these plants must either retire early or capture 90% of their CO2 emissions by 2032. So let me be clear. No power plant today can meet this standard, right? None of them, as Alex Epstein writes, none of them can meet this standard. How are you going to do this? You can't. The answer is you can't. You've got to go to solar and wind, of course. I mean, how'd that work out for Texas, right? When a deep freeze struck and these wind turbines couldn't turn on. That's what happens, right? The country of Ghana did the same thing because the World Bank pushed them to do this. How'd it turn out for them? Not good. This was before Tucker was fired from Fox News. He warned us all about what was happening in Ghana and what would be coming to the West with the pressure of like organizations like the World Bank and what they did to Ghana with the promise of some money. Watch.
World Bank approves largest ever guarantees for Ghana's energy transformation. Ooh, when they promised to transform your energy, slow down. But Ghana didn't slow down. They just kept going. And the World Bank promised to provide, and we're quoting, technical assistance for energy sector reforms and the drafting of a new renewable energy law. So in return for all this help, Ghana agreed to limit its carbon emissions. And then they entered the Paris Climate Agreement. Oh, how virtuous. What happened next? This is the part you don't read that much about. Last year, Ghana experienced a complete shutdown of its national power supply. Oh, no more electricity. No emissions because we have no electricity. And blackouts have continued since then. Just yesterday, a news source in Ghana reported that, quote, residents in parts of the Ashanti region who have been hit with power cuts are without water as well. Because it turns out you need electricity to provide water, also to grow food. Now, this is not a small thing. The Ashanti region has millions of people living in it. They're all now living in the Stone Age.
So they're back in the Stone Age, which is about to happen to the United States if we continue down this reckless path. Unreliable solar and wind can't make up the difference, right? As we know, solar and wind are great when the sun shines and when the wind blows, but guess what? They're unreliable. And they can't provide the consistent power that we need. Texas, again, 2021, the disaster. We covered it here on the show. Shows exactly what happens when you rely too much on these sources without adequate backup. And of course, the EPA's new rule, the only replacements for coal and natural gas would be these unreliable sources. Again, solar and wind are great in small supplemental pieces, but this isn't when it's the crux of your power supply, you're screwed. It's unreliable sources like solar and wind. It's ridiculous. And our future is at stake. Now, as Alex Epstein writes, the EPA's rule, if not stopped, will force the retirement of a substantial portion of our entire coal fleet right now, which provides about 16% of our electricity. And it's not just coal. The rule makes it nearly impossible to build new natural gas plants. Without reliable replacements, our grid is going to crumble. And now with this massive influx of population, massive illegal immigration in the United States, and companies needing unbelievable power for artificial intelligence, AI, Microsoft, Google, and they're building all of these massive data centers that require this power. AI computing, it takes one solar flare, by the way, just one solar flare to bring it all down. As we saw just 2 weeks ago, remember that all of the concern about that massive GMP, the massive solar flare is going to wipe out and take care of the grid. Starlink satellites were complaining about all sorts of pressure and, on their network and everything else. Companies complaining about these solar flares, right? All it takes is one massive one to do it. Dennis Quaid was on Tucker's show recently, talked about how there's a 100% probability that this will happen.
There is a 100% probability that our sun generating what they call a GMD, which is a solar storm, that hits our Earth and the magnetic field that we have around the Earth and can fry everything that is electric, which happened in, I think it was 1859. And at that time, basically, we had telegraph lines, that, as far as electricity goes. And it fried our entire telegraph system that was set up, had to be replaced. And
the entire thing?
The entire thing. And so imagine what that would do now.
So this does suggest, I mean, our country's population is clustered in cities.
Yeah.
Those probably aren't going to fare as well.
No. It'd be easier to live in the country, of course, and people who live in the country would probably have better ideas, better knowledge of how to survive after an event like this.
It would cure the AI problem pretty quick, though, right? You'd have no AI with no electricity.
Yeah, exactly.
But you wonder, there's all these, I mean, a huge part of the American economy is based on digital commerce, digital innovation. I mean, this is being...
Right. Financial system is going to break down.
Exactly.
Transportation breaks down. Your water doesn't work. Food delivery is gone. Your telephones don't work. You go back to, basically, we go back to that Carrington event. The world goes back to 1859, and we're all in the dark, and the lights are out.
Man, that's the great reset.
Yeah, that's the great reset that you want. Stay home. They'll control everything. And this is perfect. This is the perfect sort of martial law moment that the Biden administration would love before an election, by the way, right? You can't leave the house.
Oh, Clayton, don't say that.
I mean, I'm telling you, you either have a pandemic, which they've already tried, right? Or you have something like this, which will keep everybody home. So what is it going to be? Well, we'll find out. I mean, this is what's happening. Because if you think about what the Biden administration is doing, it's suicide. Right? What they're doing is suicide. We know all of this. We know everything I just laid out to you here today. We already know all of this about the grid.
Okay, you saw that, right? Talking about putting the cart before the horse. Because it's one thing if you have a solution to your pollution problem. But what if you don't really have a good solution? What if you don't have a stopgap measure? Because, for example, back in the early days of the industrial age, automobiles came into being. And indeed, I think one of the very first automobiles came out in the 1880s. I saw pictures of it. It was basically some three-wheel looking thing. And it looked like basically the wagon part for a horse, except there was no part in the front. and it had like a little motor in the back, and I do mean a little motor. I mean something that you would see on a lawnmower nowadays. But technically, it was an automobile. Problem is, it wasn't very practical. And indeed, it wasn't until Model A's and Model T Fords were built 20, 30 years later that automobiles started becoming practical. And even then, those early Model T and Model A Fords, they were not, let's just say, they were okay for driving in the city, but once you take them out in the countryside, because remember, there was no freeway system back in those days. So yeah, you end up running into the mud or running into a ditch, then the damn car pretty much will fall apart on you. Yeah, those old cars were not that well built. But the thing is, what's going on right now is just ridiculous, because these people are trying to force a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Because if you look at the American electrical grid as it currently exists, most of it is basically run by fossil fuels. And yet these people insist upon taking all that stuff, all those damn natural gas plants and some of the few coal-fired plants that still exist, and pulling them out and replacing them with windmills and solar panels. Now, of course, the problem is windmills and solar panels are environmental based, and which means that as long as the sun's shining, the solar panels work, and as long as the wind is blowing, the windmills work. But what if the wind ain't blowing, and what if it's a cloudy day? Like right now outside, the solar panels ain't going to work too well. And the fact that these people insist on doing this is just wrong-headed in the extreme. Because unlike what was happening back in the 20th century, it came to the environment. Remember those damn huge smokestacks coming out of places like Bethlehem Steel and Allentown in Pennsylvania. Those places just don't exist anymore. Those big, huge smokestack factories belching out all that black smoke, those places don't exist anymore. And indeed, in the last quarter of the 20th century, humans, for the most part, had done a pretty good job cleaning up the environment. A lot of those awful places, like the Love Canal, don't exist anymore. And yet, these environmentalist people insisting on, the world's going to end if we don't, take the damn energy grid that we've been relying on for nearly 100 years and throw it out the window for a bunch of windmills and solar panels. The problem with windmills and solar panels is that they don't grow on trees. They have to be made. And this is where things really go off the rails. Because the majority of solar panels that are currently being made are being made not in the United States or even in Europe. They're being made in China. You say, why there? Because a bunch of businessmen saw an opportunity to make money. And you say, but why China? Simple. You have a lot of people in China, and you don't have to pay them as much. And wait for it, the funny thing about solar panels is that the damn panels themselves involve a lot of various, chemical compounds like chromium and silicon, and these things you have to mine them out of the ground, and that's a lot, and that's energy. And then you have to fabricate the actual solar panels themselves. That's energy intensive. And the presumption was by these business people, mostly here, was that, hey, yeah, let's move the industry out there because those people have, wait for it, lower environmental standards than the United States. And you say, wait, what? Yeah, precisely. These people made a conscious decision to move that industry offshore into places that have a lower environmental standards. Because if you set up a solar panel factory here in the United States, you have to follow the law. And the laws are pretty strict now, unlike they were 100 years ago. You can't just set up a damn chromium plant or a damn silicon processing center. because these places have all kinds of chemical residue and all kinds of other stuff that's just left over from the process. You can't just flush it down the toilet. See the problem? And therefore, that increases the cost of making solar panels. Yeah, that's right. Therefore, these people said, let's move the thing overseas. Problem is, the people in Beijing, the people in DC ain't getting along quite well right now. Therefore, the very idea that these people are pushing this shows the wrong-headedness of their logic. You want to swap out your entire energy grid with so-called renewable energy. Problem is, these energy systems are not very reliable, and then you want to rely on basically a hostile country to provide you with those solar panels. See the problem? Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the funny thing is, most of the electrical grid that we currently have, most of it was built over 100 years ago. I mean, for example, in the United States, we didn't have a proper electrical grid until the 1920s. Indeed, if I remember correctly, they had to pass a law, I think it was during Roosevelt's time, FDR, to where they basically first set up what we now know as electric utilities. Yeah, and that was in the 1930s. And most of those utilities really haven't been updated that much. And then, of course, as you saw in Clayton Morris's video, they want to trying to push all these, electric vehicles, and not just the Tesla cars either, various, is what they call EVs. Problem is, how are you going to juice up these cars? Yeah. See the problem? And therefore, then you say, well, what about nuclear? Yeah, precisely. Problem is, these people who are pushing this stuff seem to be very allergic to nuclear energy. And you say, why? I have no idea. Indeed, right now as we speak, there's an outfit called Desert Tech, some non-profit, and they want to set up a damn something called a super grid. Now, personally, I don't think it's going to happen. But if you look it up on the computer, Desert Tech, they have this weird, huge map showing what they want to do. But then when you look at the map, which basically shows, Europe, the Middle East, and parts of North Africa, all wired into one gigantic grid. And then when you look at the various power stations they have set up all over the place, you don't see not one nuclear power station there. It's all basically solar panels and windmills, and a few geothermal facilities, up near like geysers or volcanoes, like out there in Iceland. Yeah. And then when you look at that map, you say, well, who's going to set up all those damn solar panels? Certainly not the people in the Middle East, and certainly not the Europeans. Oh, yeah, you got to go to the Chinese, because they're the ones who have the solar panel factories. But what if the Chinese doesn't want to give you those solar panels? Yeah, now you're shit out of luck. And I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm thinking, believe me, if they just set up a few nuclear power stations, they wouldn't need to mess around all these damn windmills and solar panels. I mean, because believe me, look up Desert Tech, Desert TEC, and look it up on the computer. You'll see it. This crazy map, and it shows all of these damn windmills all along the coast of Europe, running all the way down to North Africa, and you see all these damn solar panel stations all over North Africa and all over Saudi Arabia and whatnot. And I'm thinking, dude, all you need is maybe a few nuclear power stations like the one in Ukraine. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called Zaporozhye. Big power station. Huge. old Soviet era power station. Now some of you saying, "Oh, Soviet." No, 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 no. It's not like Chernobyl. Okay, Chernobyl was an older Soviet era plant. This was one that was built later on. But anyway, yeah, that damn power station is still there. It's still operating. And wait for it. Are you ready? It's the biggest power station in Europe. Cranks out damn near, I think it's about somewhere between 3 and 5 gigahertz of power. That's a lot of power. Yeah, because I think the Soviets, they built like a cascade of 6 nuclear power stations in a row, and they're all wired together. And that damn power station by itself was producing about half electricity just for Ukraine. But then, of course, the thing is, it wasn't just for Ukraine. It was part of the larger old Soviet-era electrical grid, which for the most part is still intact. But the thing is, the damn people, these damn Green New Deal types, they say, nah, we don't like nuclear power. Why? Why? Because you're worried about so-called nuclear waste? Hell, that's only temporary. Because anyone who knows anything about nuclear energy system is that modern nuclear power stations, what they call light water reactors, there's very little nuclear waste. And indeed, the fuel rods, they have something called reprocessing plants, where you take the old rods out of the reactor, send to a reprocessing plant, and they then and they reprocess them and make them good again with more enriched uranium, and you take them back and put them in the power station, and the lights come on again. But yet these green environment energy types, they don't even want to consider it. Why? I don't know. I guess they must figure all nuclear power stations are basically Chernobyl Part 2, which is kind of stupid. And the worst thing about it is these people, you saw Clayton Moore's video, these people are going to make it happen. They're going to try to basically force this green energy down the throats of the American populace. And it's not just people here, too. No, it's also the people in Canada. And you say, wait, what? Yeah, that's right. Because the funny thing about the damn electrical grid in North America is it's not just us. The Canadians are part of it, too. Because I remember the blackout that happened back in 1976 on the East Coast. And if I remember correctly, what happened was that there was an accident and it knocked the entire electrical grid on the East Coast out. Because if you look up a map, it's called the North American Regional Interconnection, and it shows all these damn various regional electrical grids. And when you look at the map, it's not just in the United States, it's in Canada too. They call it the Western Connectivity. It's all the Western states, including Alberta and British Columbia. You have a damn one in the Midwest. You have the one on the East Coast that covers all the southern states. And you have the one that's called the Quebec Interconnection. And wait for it. You ready? That electrical grid connects Quebec and all the eastern areas of Canada with, are you ready? New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Rhode Island. They're all part of the same electrical grid. And I remember that incident. And I remember they said that there was a malfunction up in Canada, and then knocked the lights out in New York City. So there you go. And of course, the people in Canada, they're more reliant upon that electrical grid than we are, because in Canada, in wintertime, woo, it gets cold up there. I mean, good grief, what do you expect? The latitude up there is in the same place where Siberia is, and everyone knows how cold it gets in Siberia. So they need their electric heaters up there. So what do you think is going to happen if they set up these damn windmills, and then one day the winter comes and all those solar panels stop working, or it gets really cold like it did in Texas a few years ago, and the windmills freeze up and they stop working. Yeah, if you're sitting there in Toronto or Montreal, man, you better get your long johns on because you're gonna get cold real quick. I tell you, these damn people, I don't know what's wrong with them. I guess their parents dropped them on their head when they were little. Because if you don't have like reliable energy, you're not going to have like a modern society, as you saw in Clayton Morris's clip. Yeah, you're going to end up in the Stone Age. Yep. And the worst thing about it is most of these people, these politicians, they know it's a boondoggle. Indeed, the woman who's currently the head of the Department of Energy, when the damn federal government under Joe Biden decided they were going to swap out all the entire federal government's fleet of automobiles. We're talking everything from FBI cars to the damn post office vehicles, and replace them with EVs. She quietly went out and bought stock in various EV companies, including Tesla. Why? Well, what do you think? I mean, if the federal government's going to sign a major contract with a bunch of EV companies, wouldn't you buy stock in those companies too? Yeah, that's right. And it's not just her. A lot of these politicians see an opportunity to make some, make a little scratch on the side. And that's why most of these contracts were basically being funneled through the federal government. I mean, remember those electric school buses that old Cackling Harris was promoting until the company went bust? Yeah. Makes you wonder how many politicians bought stock in that company just before the contract was signed. Yeah. So what does that mean? It means that for every true believer in this green new whatever, you have a bunch of basically grifters who see an opportunity to make a little money for themselves on the side. I mean, they don't give a shit about the economy. They don't usually give a shit about the environment or the electrical grid. They just see a money-making opportunity. So there you go. But then, hopefully, people who are more level-headed, people whose brain still works, will eventually basically, put the brakes on this headlong rush towards a so-called utopian green energy future, because it ain't happening. Okay, not with no damn windmills and solar panels. Because me personally, I'm betting on some of these really smart cookies in the nuclear field eventually developing that damn nuclear fusion reactor. Because they've been working on that since the middle 20th century. And I think they're pretty damn close to making it real. And believe me, when that thing finally becomes a thing, these smart people are going to say, windmills, solar panels, what's that? Because from what I remember, a nuclear fusion reactor basically has all the benefits of a nuclear power station with none of the drawbacks, such as back in the old days, some of the leftover nuclear waste, and wait for it, even the reprocessing of nuclear rods that are done now with these light water reactors. Yeah. And then let's not even pretend, with nuclear fusion reactors, you definitely would see technically a green future, because you wouldn't need the old coal-fired plants anymore, because there's no what they call greenhouse gas emissions from a nuclear power station, or any waste at all, for that matter. But first, we gotta get these knuckleheads who are making these decisions out of there, because these people don't know what the hell they're doing. Half of them are grifters. The other half got no stars in their eyes about this utopian dream that they see in their heads, but it just ain't working out on paper. Well, okay, well, that's all I gotta say about this green energy nonsense, because it is nonsense, and that's my opinion.